Welcome to this, the fourth in a series of videos about Mark's Gospel. In this video, we're looking at Mark chapter 13, verses 24 to 37, the reading set in the lectionary for the Gospel on Advent Sunday. There's a lot to consider, so this might not be as short as some of the other videos. Sorry about that. There is a lot to consider. First of all, we need to set the passage in the context of chapter 13, often known as Mark's mini-apocalypse, and then set that in the context of the Gospel as a whole to see where it fits into the narrative flow of Mark. We'll then need to look at what it is about this passage which seems to resonate so much with Mark's original audience. It seems designed to catch their attention. But then we'll look at how it resonates with the rest of the Passion narrative. We need to look at its core message of watch. There's an insistence that things are about to happen and the disciples need to be alert. Then we need to look at specifically the passages that we're talking about and the apocalyptic material within them, because all the apocalyptic language appears in the verses that we have got set for our for Advent Sunday. Then we need to look back and see where is the Advent hope that we can glean from this passage. So the first step is to look at the context. Mark chapter 13 starts in the temple with these disciples from Galilee, awestruck by the city and its buildings, and in particular the temple. They must have been devastated when Jesus said that they would all be destroyed. Then we move into private session, when the disciples ask, "When will these things be?" At the end of the chapter, we'll move out of private session. Verse 37 says, "What I have said to you in private, I say to everybody." We're moving back into the public arena. Watch, the key message of the chapter. But chapter 13 itself is in a very significant position in the Gospel. It's immediately before the action of the Passion really takes over. Jesus arrived in Jerusalem on Palm Sunday with his triumphal entry, and since then he's been going in and out to Bethany, but arguing in the temple with the authorities there and doing teaching. This marks the conclusion of that teaching, and the next stage will be for Jesus to go back to Bethany, to the house of Simon the leper, where he will be anointed in advance for his burial. And after that, we're into the upper room, where Jesus predicts that one of those who are with him will betray him, and then we have the Last Supper. And of course from there into the garden where he's arrested, and then up before the Sanhedrin. So this is an absolutely key point in Mark's Gospel. And so it must be really important to have such a block of teaching at this stage. To us, this chapter can seem like a gross intrusion, an interruption into the natural flow of Mark's Gospel, and in particular of the Passion narrative. But I don't think that's how it would have sounded to Mark's original audience for whom he's writing. Much more, it seems to me, it would have sounded as for us in a film where the actor speaks to camera, or in a play when the fourth wall is broken and the actors, having completely ignored the audience and engrossed in the drama that they are portraying, suddenly turns and speaks directly to the audience. I suspect that that is exactly how this passage would have felt as it was first read out. There are familiar elements. Wars and rumours of wars. In Jerusalem at the time, there were numerous insurrections. We know of several, but there are almost certainly those of which we know nothing. There were earthquakes. I was quite surprised to read in commentaries that, yes, there were notable earthquakes in this period. And they would have been seen as so auspicious. Famines in Jerusalem, certainly. We've got the collections in 1 and 2 Corinthians in particular, where clearly the Jerusalem Christians are in great need. People would be taken before councils. Yes, they would be arrested because they were following an unsanctioned faith in a tyranny, under a tyranny. It would not have been tolerated. So they would have been up before councils. We know about that from Acts and Paul's work to try to destroy the church. Taken up before councils. Literally the word there, by the way, is Sanhedria, Sanhedrins. And they would be beaten in the synagogues. And in that context, yes, brother would betray brother. And that would be a fearful thing. You were forever looking over your shoulder, wondering who would betray you. But in particular, it's as though Mark deliberately addresses these disciples when he says, when you see the abomination that causes desolation, let the reader understand. He's directly addressing those first readers, those first listeners to this gospel. Now, we don't know precisely what that abomination of desolation was. The first readers would have done. But it almost certainly involved the disruption of the daily sacrifice and worship in the temple. When we go back to Daniel chapter 11 and chapter 12, where this is first mentioned, this is a quote from Daniel, then we find that, yes, along with the abomination of desolation, we get the interruption of temple worship. And in the context of insurrections, probably the most natural thing would be for the authorities to remove the religious privileges of the Jews, to try to disrupt them. So not only have we gathered the disciples up and grabbed their attention, this passage also leads on into the rest of the narrative. In the upper room, Jesus will predict his betrayal. One of his new family members, the family of believers, will betray him as brother betrays brother. He'll go into the garden and tell his disciples to watch, but they'll go to sleep. He will be arrested and he'll be taken before the council, the Sanhedrin, just as the disciples referred to in chapter 13 were taken before the Sanhedria. He'll be flogged and he'll stand before Pilate, the governor. All these take us into the passion, and draw the listeners into the text. They can identify with what is happening as Jesus, as echoing their own experience. And that is one of the key messages of Mark's gospel. But that takes us to the next stage. What is the challenge for those first disciples precisely in Mark chapter 13? Well, the word that keeps being repeated is watch. Verse 5, watch that no one deceives you. Verse 9, be on your guard, watch. that you will be handed over to the local councils, the Sanhedrin, and flogged in the synagogues. Verse 23, watch, be on your guard. I have told you everything ahead of time. Verse 33, be on your guard, be alert. You do not know when the time will come. And of course, that final verse that I've already mentioned, verse 37, what I say to you, I say to everybody. Watch. Something needs to, is going to happen, and they need to be utterly aware of it. And then when you see the abomination, we've talked about that, haven't we? In the abomination of desolation, let the reader understand. So that's just when you see it. Then the imperatives kick in. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down or enter the house to take anything out. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. This is urgent stuff. When this starts to happen, you need to be out, because the end is coming. The end is the end of the temple, the destruction of those wonderful buildings, which is what this passage is apparently all about. It answers the question of those that the disciples ask in private. That's fine. It may be what the passage is all about, but how on earth does that help us deal with the apocalyptic passages that we have to deal with on Advent Sunday? But in those days, following that distress, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Well, actually, the commentators, and this seems to make complete sense, see this as, in a sense, hyperbole, but actually not such extreme hyperbole. This is about the destruction of the temple, the overthrow of the local government, as it were, the hope for the Jews. And it's about the destruction of the place and the symbol of God's presence, the temple itself. We might talk about it being earth-shattering, or the world being turned upside down. We don't literally mean that the globe is fractured and falling apart in space, or that somehow the earth has found a new axis to rotate on. No, we know exactly what it means. We mean it's earth-shattering, or their world is turned upside down. So that's what's going on here from that point of view. But that's not all. What about, at that time they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory? Well, it has to be said, we've already seen Jesus come with power. He's even raised the dead. And glory. We've seen it in the Transfiguration. But what's this all about? Well, his purpose in doing that is to send his angels to gather the elect. This is about the elect here. And so perhaps Luke will come to our aid in understanding this, and the story of the stoning of Stephen. Stephen says in Acts chapter 7 verse 56, as he is approaching death, "Look," he said, "I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." It's as though the angels have come to gather Stephen. So here is a message of comfort for those who are in terror. It's not a cosmic gathering of the elect. It's saying hang on, yes, you are facing persecution. You will be handed over. You will be put upon trial. You will be stoned to death. But you will be gathered. That's all very fine, but it leaves two questions. The first is, well, what about those who don't get that sort of vision that Stephen had? And perhaps even more poignant, what about those who weren't faithful, those who broke, those who gave in? The second question is a bit closer to home. How on earth do we preach on this on Advent Sunday? To go to the first question first. I think that's what Mark's Gospel as a whole is largely about. I said this leads into the rest of the Passion narrative. And as that Passion narrative moves forward, the disciples all fail, every last one of them. Judas first, of course. And then the disciples fall away, in spite of their protestations that they'll remain faithful. The disciples who are asked to stay awake and watch with Jesus will go to sleep. Peter, who, credit to him, stays longer than most, ends up denying Jesus. And even those most faithful of disciples, the women, who are famously the first to see and report the resurrection, in Mark's Gospel, do no such thing. They neither see the risen Christ, nor do they carry the message which they're given to say that the Lord is risen and will meet the disciples in Galilee. All fail. But more than that, Jesus himself on the cross will die not with a glorious vision of heaven, as Stephen did, but with those devastating words on his lips. My God, why have you forsaken me? Words which Mark preserves in the Aramaic, which usually means that they are of colossal significance. And of course here, surely they are. It seems to me that Mark's Gospel as a whole is about hope for those who fail. If even the great heroes of faith aren't heroes at all, but have all fallen, and if Jesus himself can die with a cry of dereliction on his lips, then surely there must be hope for those who cry, believing they've been abandoned by God, and for those who die struggling with their own failure. It's par for the course. Under such extreme circumstances, we can all fail, but God is compassionate. I'm sure that is why Mark ends the way he does. He can't afford to have a single person standing to be a hero of the faith. We'll look in more detail at that in another video. But it's why I find Mark the most hopeful of all the Gospels, because it's hopeful for a person like me, who's very conscious that he doesn't live up to the standards that he knows he should do. So, to the second of our final questions, how on earth do we preach about this and Advent hope on Sunday? Well, it seems to me that it is profoundly hopeful. If it's hopeful for people who fail, it's hopeful for us. It's not that this is not a message for the end of time. It was a message for what appeared to be the end of everything, the destruction of the temple. You don't get much more final than that. And it was a message of hope in that context. Don't worry, I've predicted it. I know it's coming. we've got everything under control. And when you die, God will send, Jesus, the Son of Man, will send his angels to gather you. In Mark's Gospel especially, even if you failed, even if you die with a cry of dereliction on your lips, you are loved and will be gathered and will be raised up. It's not that this isn't a hope for the end of time. It's that it is a hope for all time, for all endings, for all deaths. For me, that is profoundly what this is about. And it is Advent hope. When things come to an end, God is there. When things seem devastating and beyond control, God is in control and will send his angels to gather you. So yes, there is profound hope. But we don't need to push it into the distant future and some cosmic end of the universe. Whenever we meet an end, there is Advent hope. The Son of Man, at the right hand of God, will send his angels for all of us. For those who struggled and failed, and for those whom, for whatever that means, were in some sense successful and were granted that vision. We all have hope. May God bless us with that hope, and may it touch us deep in our lives, and may we be able to share it on Sunday. So, bye for now.